Hey, what I do?
Hi. Do you guys like my space buns? Do you guys like my shirt? Look at that. That's dedication.
Mando talk.
Oh,
Mando
talk.
talk. Woo!
Boy, that goes on for a long time in person.
Anyway, let me check this audio right quick. What we are here to talk about is season 1 of The Mandalorian. Welcome, folks, to the newest edition of Deep Dive.
Always so official every time. Now, a little backstory on our Star Wars histories. John has seen them. I have not. I've seen episode 4. That's the first one. Yeah?
Yes.
I needed confirmation. And then I saw the one with Diego Luna.
That's Rogue One.
I saw Rogue One. And then I saw The Mandalorian. And that is the extent. However, I have seen The Mandalorian 10 times. So, I will be here for The Mandalorian discussions. If you have any questions about any lore, history, stuff that happened in other properties, films, the shows, I am not your girl for that. Sorry, mate.
So it's interesting you point that out because I feel like a lot of people have gotten into Star Wars through The Mandalorian. The same way I think we just recently saw a lot of people getting more and more into the MCU because of WandaVision.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see like the generational, not divide, but just the difference in how people consume entertainment. So like some people really do gravitate more to like an episodic like series as opposed to sitting down for 2+ hours just soaking in a complete story as opposed to kind of spreading it out.
And also, when you talk about something as big as Star Wars, that's not just sitting down to watch a movie. That's sitting down to watch a franchise. That's hours and hours and hours and hours of content. And that's only if you watch the movies.
Just the movies.
There's everything else surrounding it. There's like video game lore that you miss. And there's so much that it seems very, very daunting. But when you have something like The Mandalorian that's kind of telling its own story, you don't need all of that backstory. It helps. You can get references better than I can. But it's not necessary to enjoy and understand completely the story that they're telling.
Yeah.
And I think that's why The Mandalorian is as popular as it is, because people who aren't even like huge Star Wars fans can still enjoy it for what it is. Another
thing to add on to that is that this is, I feel like it's Star Wars' first like real foray into a different type of genre. I mean, and we saw a little bit of that with Rogue One, which was more of a war movie than anything else. And before anyone comes for me in the chat, and I know Star Wars has always been inspired by certain Western and like aspects of that type of cinema, but this is through and through like a space Western.
Yeah.
And I think adding that type of genre, giving us something new while still feeling familiar, is what kind of brings like lifelong fans and newcomers into this new thing, and everyone seems to really, really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I know we do. So yes, The Mandalorian, it is the first live-action Star Wars series from Disney Plus by creator and showrunner Jon Favreau.
We love Jon.
Yeah, for those who may not be familiar.
If you're not familiar with him, you're familiar with his work.
Yeah, you definitely know Iron Man, and you may be familiar with The Jungle Book.
Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe.
Have you heard of it? I don't know.
Yeah, so...
He did, Zathura? Not even behind the camera. He's also an actor.
Yeah.
He was in, like, 3 episodes of Friends, if y'all remember that.
Yeah, or, he did a lovely little indie movie that I really love, Chef.
Yeah.
Love that movie. He directed and starred in that one. So, yeah, he's a really dynamic director, in my opinion.
And he's a huge nerd.
Big time.
Big ass nerd, apparently.
Big time. Yeah, so just a little description of The Mandalorian here.
Is this directly from Disney?
No.
Oh, you made this?
It's a combination of me and like the internet. This space western follows a lone Mandalorian bounty hunter played by Pedro Pascal in the outer reaches of the galaxy, initially hired by Imperial forces to retrieve a child for them, now on the run in an effort to protect the child. I think that mostly makes sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're a much bigger, I don't know if I'd say a bigger Mandalorian fan. You're a bigger Pedro Pascal fan. But I know you've watched...
Is this compared to you?
Yes.
I think I'm a bigger both fan. compared to you.
All right, that's fair. I can't even really argue.
That's
Let's
true.
try and go back to the
Okay.
very beginning from when we first watched the series. What do you think your first impression was as a whole, if you can remember?
Wow, that was so long ago. If you know me, I have a terrible memory. I can't remember anything. That's why it takes me 10 times watching something to grasp it. I remember being very excited to see Pedro Pascal, and then learning in episode 1, Mandalorians don't take off their helmets. So, boy, was that a punch in the gut immediately, but it's okay. I was like, keep trucking with this, I guess. I just remember it being really cool. It looked really cool. And that was even before I knew what all went into it, which we'll get into some of the production side of things. But I remember it looking really pretty at times.
Yeah. Something you enjoyed, because I can say this because we watched it together. Something we really enjoyed was just how expansive it is. So for me, I'm a pretty casual Star Wars fan. Like, I love the movies for the most part, but I'm kind of like you, like where once you start taking into consideration like all the comics and the books and the video game, like there's a lot to get into, and it can be really daunting. So I kind of stuck with the movies throughout most of that. I didn't really get into any of the animated shows, which were still considered canon. Yeah, I just kind of stayed in that one lane. But I loved about this show is just how much it could expand the Star Wars universe, because I think especially with the sequel trilogy, people were kind of getting tired of, and I'm not getting into the toxicity of like the fandom, I'm just talking about like as a story point. I think people were just kind of tired of seeing Jedis and following like the Skywalker storyline, like the Skywalker saga.
I guess I could understand from the jump. That's like the main. That's
kind of for every single movie except for the Star Wars stories like Solo and Rogue One. Yeah, it was kind of just the same like through line. So with The Mandalorian, it was cool seeing like not only expanding on a race of characters like we were introduced to with Boba Fett, but just like kind of digging deeper into that. And this show, while like developing new canon, it also draws from a lot of those obscure things, whether it be from the movies or from other books, video games, in both season 1 and 2.
No, but I agree with you. One thing I could realize, because through cultural osmosis, you learn some things. Like, I knew who Yoda was. I know who Luke Skywalker is. Chewbacca, like the big guys. I know who they are.
Yeah, Darth Vader.
I know Darth Vader. I also knew that Boba Fett was a character that was like in the movies, some of them, but was never like, I don't think he had any lines ever.
Depending on the movie and which like version of the movie you're watching, because you gotta remember George Lucas like added like scenes and throughout time.
He wasn't given like a lot, but everyone loved him for like no good reason. Sorry if that's mean. But through The Mandalorian, you're learning more backstory about not necessarily Boba Fett, but like his creed. And as I've researched Wikipedia, which is like how I spend my days nowadays, just trying to understand what the fuck I'm watching in The Mandalorian, a lot of things are like that. Like IG-11 was just, and we were just watching part of the Gallery series on Disney Plus. If you're a huge fan of The Mandalorian, I highly recommend sitting down and watching all of those. They're like 30-minute parts for season 1. I can't remember how many there are, maybe like 6. And they're going through like each part of production. It's really, really cool. So they were talking about like Ugnaughts and IG-11, all of these like background characters that before were just filler in this expansive universe that you don't have time to like dig into who each person is. And then they go back and they add the lore that was missing from the beginning. Not missing, but just like not there. Like
it wasn't there in the mainstream.
Right. And then there's a lot of stuff that like fans end up freaking out over, like the guy with the ice cream maker.
Yeah, well, I want to hang on to that. But yeah, and this show, it's cool because there's a real solid selection of directors that they utilized for this series, and in turn we also have quite the cast, and I obviously can't go into every single member of the cast, but here are a number of actors who do pop up in the series. So we mentioned Pedro Pascal before, he's the star of the show. But yeah, we also have Taika Waititi, Carl Weathers, Gina Carano, Werner Herzog, Giancarlo Esposito, Ming-Na Wen, Amy Sedaris, Bill Burr, Richard Ayoade, Jason Sudeikis, and Nick Nolte, and many, many, many more. There are some names in there that are like, that makes perfect sense to put them in a Star Wars property like Giancarlo or Werner Herzog.
Yeah.
But then you have some names in there like
Amy Sedaris
or Jason Sudeikis.
Never expect them to pop up in a Star Wars project.
I want forever, for the rest of time, whenever there's a new Star Wars property, I want a random
Jason Sudeikis.
Not Jason Sudeikis, but a random Stormtrooper cameo, because Jason Sudeikis is a great one. But in episode 7, The Force Awakens, James Bond, Daniel Craig, he popped up as a stormtrooper.
Yeah.
Never took off his helmet. He was uncredited in the movie. You found out after the fact.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I was like, literally anyone can be under any of those helmets. So
can women be stormtroopers?
yeah, there's Captain Phasma, who was
know who
played
that
by
is.
Gwendolyn Christie.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, at least in the new Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
I guess you never really knew. No, they were all clones.
Yeah.
They were all clones of the same dude, Jango Fett.
I know that. I understand that reference now.
I understand that reference now. Something else we love about the show is the music.
The
now,
music.
We did a deep dive on Black Panther.
Mm-hmm. So this name might sound familiar.
Ludwig Göransson, who did the music for Black Panther, was the sole composer for The Mandalorian. And
I remember
hot damn.
It was, I think, after the first season ended and I had started my first rewatch and I was humming along to it and you were surprised that I knew the theme of it. You're like, you know the theme. You were a little disappointed because at that point it was an obsession. But
oh, now I can't stop singing it.
but it's like, that's why it was so catchy. It's so good. And he uses this big ass flute for the main theme. Again, you got to watch that.
Oh, you know what's cool? Only because I didn't write it down and I'm going to forget about it. I believe it was the finale, when you see that Mandalorian save young Din, there's this really like insane like guitar riff. It's that flute solo played on guitar.
Oh, yeah.
I never realized that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't even rewatch the
like,
last episode. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, the music is fantastic because Ludwig is fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know, to go from like Black Panther to this, he helped compose some of the music for Trolls World Tour.
Yeah, well,
that doesn't make any sense.
So he was actually, in addition to being, a cinematic composer,
he's also like,
he's a hip hop producer.
Yeah,
he used to do all of Childish Gambino stuff.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, that's Donald Glover, his rap moniker.
That's a good word, John.
Thanks.
I thought you were gonna say alter ego or something. Alias.
Oh, no, like a superhero.
Like Hannah Montana to Miley Cyrus, Childish Gambino.
I'm not going to talk about Hannah Montana.
Oh, perfect. That was like an SAT question. You're welcome.
But yeah, no, I love his music, and it's cool because there are moments in the show where he really does draw that like John Williams style music, especially with like the Moff Gideon theme, like whether it's like very string heavy, and it's great. But yeah, I love hearing this new style, like the real heavy drums and the brass, and then you hear that little light guitar playing in the middle of it.
Yeah.
It's so great. I absolutely love the score for this entire show. And then there's some interesting things they do. Like, we're going to compare a little bit to season 2, but we're going to try and mainly stick to season 1. But like in the Prisoner episode, something about the score I noticed there, rewatching it. I mean, the whole episode had like an 80s like horror tinge to it, but that reflected in the score. I don't know. It's something about like those seemingly minute details really adds to just like the vibe of the whole entire it makes it richer. It makes it a richer experience. But that's what makes people like really love everything you feel coming out of something like that.
Yeah. And I think the music plays really well with what you were saying earlier about mixing old and new. That's kind of like a theme that runs throughout every aspect of production.
Yeah.
And the music, like you said, it has that like old school 70s Star Wars feel and sound. But then you layer in like synth stuff that wouldn't be possible back then.
Yeah.
Or like those drum hits.
Yeah.
That's like so today's music.
Yeah.
Like
it's
hip hop stuff that you wouldn't have gotten in the 70s.
Yeah, because I feel like John Williams, no disrespect, he is the GOAT. Ludwig is an upcoming GOAT as well. But John Williams is like, his style is very like orchestral.
Right. Classical music.
Yeah, and I feel like Ludwig has a much more like a band feel. A couple key differences there. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we shouted out the music in there because, of course,
it's great.
Music nerd, so got to do it.
And the second season, it just keeps
insane.
coming with the music.
We're going to dive a little bit into each episode, but before we do, we just wanted to touch on a couple of the production aspects like we were mentioning.
Yeah, the overarching stuff that affects
that makes the show like possible, Something that this show, it kind of revolutionized. There were some revolutionary things in the field of visual effects. Something this show does really well is it blends like special effects with practical effects, and it creates just such like magic on the screen.
Yeah. Because a lot of things, a lot of projects in the past have done something similar with good results. Like mixing practical with special effects is like a surefire way to make whatever you're working on 10 times better.
Well, that's what makes Star Wars Star Wars, like that. I mean, there's some really great documentaries out there of like showing how the original trilogy was made, because even with something like The Mandalorian, where they had to kind of create new things and find new ways to do things, in the 70s, they were very limited on what they could do.
It wasn't so much like just budgetary things. It was literal like
stuff hadn't been invented.
We don't have computers like we do today.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do it any other way.
Yeah.
So you're going to make a miniature and you're going to blow it up that way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And nowadays, that's the more expensive option, right?
Yeah.
That's a more time-consuming way of doing it. If you do everything on computers, it's quicker, it's less expensive, but does it have that grounding, down-to-earth feel? No, you lose that.
Yeah. And see, this might be a little unpopular. So, like,
Ooh.
that was one of my complaints about Zack Snyder's Justice League, was that I feel like they were a little over-reliant on CGI. And, I mean, I still enjoyed the movie, don't get me wrong, but it felt like I was watching, a movie. Whereas, in this, it kind of feels like these people are actually in these places. And a lot of that had to do with a lot of the puppets and props and stuff that they, used. They didn't have to pick up like a big, outline of a boulder covered in green felt.
Like one of those, what did they use for Thanos? They used just like a ball on a stick, but a printout of his head.
Yeah, because
like,
it was attached to Josh Brolin.
Yeah, but you had to interact with it up here. You couldn't even look at him in the face. I don't know. It just adds like this magic that a lot of movies today don't have anymore.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Void?
Sure. I don't think it's called the Void. Can't remember what it's called though. The Vacancy.
All right, cool. We're off to a good start.
I wrote it as the Void, but that was just from memory. So there's this space created, like they call it a performance space. And basically what it is, it's a stage, like a traditional stage.
Like a sound stage.
Right. But smaller. And it's surrounded by, 270 degrees of LED walls. Basically like big, high definition television screens are completely surrounding this performance stage. So they put whatever pictures they want to put, whatever scenery they want to have in the background is projected on these screens. And they project them up on the ceiling to get accurate lighting. Lighting is something that makes or breaks special effects.
Absolutely.
So if you can get everything to match the same lighting, that's like really hard to do artificially. And this was, I think, the very first project that they used this technology with.
Yeah. And now more and more productions are utilizing this. I think the next like big production that's going to be using this technology from ILM is, I believe it's ILM, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now Marvel is going to utilize the same technology, and it looks stupendous. Like,
you remember how I said like one of the first things that I mentioned was how pretty it looked?
Yeah.
I assumed that was like partially on location filming, and actually over 50% of season 1 was filmed in this space.
Yeah. Can't imagine how useful this technology would have been for something like Endgame, which I'm still mad they didn't win the Oscar for Best VFX, because they had to digitally cut out every single actor out of the original frames and put them into a brand new environment. I can't imagine how much time that took. But yeah, no, it's crazy, especially like I think of the scenes when they're on like Tatooine. You could see how much the sun is beating off the sand, and like
you can feel it's like hot and sunny.
Yeah, so it's insane. So moving on a little bit from that. So we've been talking a little bit about some of the practical effects they used, and I think the biggest one that people probably know of, or maybe they don't, is The Child.
Yes.
They did a blend of CGI with practical like puppets and animatronics, which, I mean, that's the way to go.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think the thing that really makes that specific puppet look good, the thing that makes The Child look good, is that you can't tell, unless you're looking for it, you can't tell when that switch is happening from puppeteered animatronic to CG.
Yeah.
Whenever he's walking, that's CG. Whenever he's eating anything, if he's putting his hands in his mouth, that's CG.
Well, when we were watching the Disney Gallery episode on FX, they mentioned that even the CG version of The Child, of Baby Yoda, he doesn't do anything that the puppet can't do. So it's not like...
It's not unrealistic movements.
Yeah, so
they're creating a CG puppet. basically.
So, in the original Star Wars, we had Puppet Yoda. The original Yoda was a puppet. In the prequel series, we got this weird CGI Yoda who, like, in stills looks fine, but then you get to, you get to episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Yoda is like this little old ass man walking with a cane. All of a sudden, he's flipping around, chopping up Count Dooku and all sorts of stuff, and it's a little jarring. Cool. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, but at the same time, it's just like as a kid, it was cool, but now I'm like,
it's like, I don't know
would
about
Yoda move that way?
And this finally redemption. When you mix practical with CG, with today's technology, it looks fantastic. IG-11, also a mix of practical and CG, which is cool because I also assumed he was fully CG. No. Zero from episode 6, his top half, kind of like C-3PO. It's just like a guy in a suit. But if you ever see his legs are CG'd. I wanted to throw in more examples that weren't the child.
Yeah.
Where they mix, because it's not something that they do for that one character. They do it throughout both seasons. Yeah,
and they also use, like much like the original Star Wars trilogy, they use the miniature models for the spacecrafts and whatnot. Misty Rosas, who is a performance artist, she was the actor portraying Quill, who was voiced by Nick Nolte, but she was actually the one in the costume. And I almost said prosthetic, but prosthetic's not really what it is. It's
kind of prosthetics, but it's an animatronic face mask.
Yeah.
So just the face is animatronic. I didn't realize that it was a separate person than who was voicing them.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know Nick Nolte was voicing him. But just listening to her describe her job, basically, she was like in a suit, like fully suited up in her little Quill outfit with this big ass robot helmet basically on.
Yeah.
She couldn't hear anything. She wasn't the one delivering the lines. So like her whole performance was like neck down.
Yeah.
And she had to make it seamless from what the puppeteers were doing from the neck up.
Yeah. So
That's
I think
crazy.
I think of like when I was taking like acting classes and stuff. Like we are trained to like use our full body as like an instrument. But there's something about like performance artists specifically, especially people who have to do like costume work. So whether it be, face characters at Disney or someone who is rocking a Quill costume, when you take away the features of like your features, your face, your voice, like, and you're just using your body to kind of tell a story is something very difficult.
Yeah.
And when you add in another person's voice, you have to really take into consideration like the inflection in which they're saying it. Like,
exactly.
If someone's like kind of like just sitting down, like you have to kind of like match what they're doing. And I think that's just it's such an interesting challenge as an actor. Absolutely crazy to think that there are, you are in a scene, you're performing, and there's 3 other people operating your eyebrows, your eyes, and your mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool, but and everyone had the same reaction when, episode 7 hits and we see what, inevitably happens with Quill. He was like a real character. And it was also Misty Rosas who played our lovely little frog lady from season 2. Who also
everyone loved.
Everyone fell in love with.
I definitely wanted to give Misty Rosas her credit because that is not an easy job.
Not at all.
And she killed it both times.
Yeah.
And like you said, you fell in love with each of her characters.
And that's also a credit to, Nick Nolte for, I didn't know that was his voice either, coming up with a voice for this character. It's funny because I saw a picture of Nick Nolte, trying to remind myself who he was. For some reason I blinked. And I was like, man, he looks like Quill.
Sorry, Nick Nolte, for saying you look like Quill.
No disrespect to my boy Nick. All right, so those were some of the production things we wanted to touch on. So let's talk a little bit now about what everyone really wants to talk about. Let's talk about the show itself. We're gonna do a little series of mini deep dives into each episode.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah, we're gonna go chapter by chapter, starting with chapter 1, The Mandalorian.
Aptly named.
Yeah, this is directed by Dave Filoni and written by Jon Favreau. Dave Filoni is actually the creator of the Clone Wars, which was, the very, very popular Star Wars animated series, which comes back into play throughout the series.
Yeah. And I hear nothing but good things.
Yeah, people absolutely love it.
And I think we can say without a shadow of a doubt that Dave Filoni is probably the foremost Star Wars expert.
Yeah.
Ever.
If you're going to do anything Star Wars from here on out, include him him. But also, what's interesting is we're getting a sequel series this year for the Clone Wars, because we're getting Star Wars The Bad Batch. We'll see characters we met in The Mandalorian in The Bad Batch and kind of get their origin story. So I'm excited about that. So the opening shot for The Mandalorian really just kind of sets off that Western vibe. It's such a great cold open.
Talk about Western. We're going to a bar and we're kicking ass.
Yeah, it's like a saloon, and as soon as it opens, it's just that little flute, which kind of is reminiscent of like the whistle that...
Yeah.
It's fantastic. You get to hear Mando for the first time. The most badass first line you could have.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? I can bring you in warm.
I can bring you in warm.
Or I can bring you in cold.
Sorry, I just really wanted to hear her say it. We also get Carl Weathers as Grief Karga, the leader of the Bounty Hunters Guild. Taika Waititi is the voice of IG-11. We see Werner Herzog as the client. But before we get too much into him, I'd like to know a little bit more about what you thought of, like, I don't know, I guess you've watched it a little more than I have, but just when you revisit this opening, like, episode, it kind of draws you in with, like, the backstory of the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
I just want to know what maybe your take was on that. Maybe it's different than mine.
With Din as a character, he doesn't talk a lot. So you get his backstory from the context of, like, the people around him. So the first thing he does, he doesn't say a word. He kills a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then takes a bounty. I don't even know how many words he says in this entire episode, but you just get such like a good idea of his reality as a bounty hunter, what that means, what that looks like for him, who he is as a person, which is very reserved, obviously, and no nonsense. I loved him so much.
Yeah, he as a character is like, especially in this first episode, he's very mysterious. And the only other Mandalorian, if you're not familiar with the animated stuff, so I'm going to keep it in the realm of the movies going into this show.
Yeah.
Like the only one we would know is Boba Fett,
right?
Who also didn't speak a hell of a whole lot, and we knew he was a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
And that was about it. So with Din, like we see him right out the gate. He's, like you pointed out, he is kicking ass. He is taking names and
more like taking bounties.
Taking bounties. And there's seemingly no like moral compass for him until we see him bring that Beskar to the armorer. And, you know, they're like, let's reserve some for the foundlings. And we get a couple little flashbacks here and there. Then we see him actually taking that really heavy bounty from the client, played by Werner Herzog, who I can't believe he's never been in anything Star Wars prior to this.
And I can't believe spoilers, I can't believe he died.
I can't believe he just talks like that.
Yeah,
he's not doing a voice for the show. He just talks like that.
That's just his
He has a really great cameo in The Boondocks.
Oh, God.
In an episode of The Boondocks. It's so funny. I thought it was someone doing a really good impression of him, and then I saw the credits. I'm like, nope, he did that.
Bounty hunting is a very...
Bounty hunting.
I don't know why I always sound Russian when I do it.
I don't know why either. But yeah, so we see that the Mandalorian are kind of living underground, in hiding, exiled, if you will.
Yeah. So this episode is basically just like showing us a little bit of what life is like for the Mandalorians right now. If you're someone who understands the timeline and the actions that have happened before, that's cool. That probably helps a lot. But for someone like me, I'm like, I don't know. They're underground now.
And we learn more as, you know, as the series goes on, but at least we see where he's coming from at this point in time. We get this really, really, really wonderful action sequence once Mando is on the planet where he needs to go retrieve the bounty. He meets Quill for the first time, who's like, I'll help you out because I need to get these other fools out of here.
Basically, you get like an idea for how, I don't know about feared, if that's the right word, but like everywhere he goes, everyone turns and looks at him. Like Mandalorians are very like few and far between, at least out on the surface. Yeah. And they're also like renowned for being good warriors and bounty hunters. I think that's also something important that's established in this first episode. It's just like the impact that Din's presence has on the people around him and what it means to be a Mandalorian right now.
So once we finally get to this planet, he's outnumbered. IG-11 comes through, voiced by Taika Waititi, of course, and they have good little banter back and forth. What I really want to touch on is the reveal of the child. I think like we witnessed kind of like TV history in a way.
A couple of TV history moments happening on The Mandalorian.
And seeing that for the first time, I remember sitting on the couch and I just was like,
you freaked out.
Because like, I mean, because we got to mention her, other than Yaddle,
I do not.
There's not been any like substantial member of Yoda's species. And Yoda has long been dead
Yeah.
by this time. So it was bizarre
Yeah.
to see another little guy like this.
That's another thing that was like cultural osmosis. I know who Yoda is. So when I saw that little fucking thing, oh, he was so cute.
The
and I was
most
like,
adorable
I
thing they could ever-
understand to an extent. But I was like, oh, is that Yoda when he was a baby? That doesn't make any sense time-wise.
No, yeah.
But I didn't know.
And I just remember the internet
Freaked out.
it went ablaze because everyone was just like, what the hell is going on?
I don't think Disney realized how important that was going to be to people and how much people would love the child.
I think it was a real catch-22 for them because I feel like any sort of merch would have probably been leaked. And, you know, because I follow like a couple like Funko pages or like Disney pin pages and stuff like that. And people are leaking shit all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's either keep the reveal or make the merch to be ready to be sold.
And that reveal was way,
Oh my
way
God.
worth it.
Yeah, it was just, that's a moment I will never forget. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of a rundown of chapter 1. Chapter 2, The Child.
Mm-hmm.
Upon revisiting, not my favorite episode, but I understand why it's important.
We're setting up some stuff.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important, is just that it really does establish a lot. I did love seeing the Jawas back.
Yeah, we saw Jawas.
They had a really, really great set piece there.
And also, for someone who doesn't know anything about Jawas or never seen them before, it was a very good introduction because it's like, oh, I get their whole thing. Like, I understand it.
Perfectly, like, captured who they were.
Yeah.
Just these annoying little bastards.
Aw.
Yeah.
They're cute.
They're kind of cute.
They're thieves.
I was going to say, you don't want to be caught with one.
What you've done is illegal.
So this episode was directed... Actually, I'm going to start with the writer first. It was written by Jon Favreau, as most episodes are. Mm-hmm. This episode, I didn't realize, was directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who you guys will hear that name again, and you'll realize why it was so surprising. And he's known for directing, you know, films such as Dope and The Wood. So we do get some important setting up moments, like you mentioned, but there were also a couple of weird, like, just like filmmaking moments.
Yeah.
For me, there's two moments. There's a really random, as he's fighting the Mudhorn. Mm-hmm. As a sequence itself, it's pretty cool, but there's this random moment where it's like slow motion for like 2 seconds. Like, and then it never comes back.
Like laggy slow motion. And I think it's just to be like, oh, he's fucked up.
Like he's fainting or something.
Yeah. But it was strange. It was a weird place for that.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it was super weird. But in that moment, during that sequence, we also see the real important reveal of this episode was that the child is force sensitive.
Yeah.
And actually more than force sensitive. He's able to use the force when needed, which is quite important. Yeah. Because at this point in the show, we've not heard the term Jedi. We've not heard the term the Force. No one seems to know what the hell that was. Din's kind of like, I don't really know what happened.
Yeah. Din and Quill are just like, magic, I guess.
He's like, tell me what you said again? You crazy. Molly, you in danger, girl. But also there was like that weird, I wasn't a big fan of like the fixing stuff montage they threw at the end of that episode.
I didn't dislike that as much as you did.
I don't know why it bothered me. I think this show sometimes, like in general, for me, doesn't do a great job at like telling how much time has passed.
Yeah.
Because there'll be times where,
fair.
he revisits a character we met earlier in that season. The way they're talking, it makes it seem like months have gone by.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. I didn't realize, like.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. There are some times where I'm like, how far after this event is this new event?
Yeah. It's like, I don't really know how they would fix it. So,
right.
Like,
it doesn't really impact the story a lot. It's just, we're missing a little bit of context as to like when all this stuff is happening.
The important thing in this episode is that we see the child use the Force. Mm-hmm. Moving on to chapter 3, The Sin.
The Sin.
This was directed by Deborah Chow, written by Jon Favreau. You mentioned something earlier in terms of props, which they brought back. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit.
So, through my extensive research on Wikipedia, there's this background character in episode 5 who's like...
It's like an extra. It's not even like a character.
Yeah. He was made a character after... He was like retconned into an actual character, but couldn't tell you what's happening in that film, but... they're leaving somewhere and he's like taking all his valuables and he has it in this like storage thing, but that storage thing was an ice cream maker machine that someone found, I think, in like a thrift store, and thought it looked spacey, So they like painted it and threw it in as a prop. And then
But people became obsessed with it.
Somehow the fans decided that that was their fucking guy. And now there's like an annual running of that character. I forgot what his name was. People dress up like him and they have their ice cream makers and they go to like every con. So again, like how he did with other like background species and these characters and stuff, Jon Favreau decided to bring that back and gave it a name. So I think this was the first time it was named. It's called a Camtono. Camtono. And then that is how Din is paid for.
Yeah, because they keep the Beskar in there.
They keep the Beskar bars that look delicious, by the way. If I could bite into one of those bars,
shatter every single one of your teeth.
I would shatter every tooth, but it would go down so well. It looks like it should be chocolate. I want to eat it.
Bring it to Disney.
Disney Springs, I'm looking at you.
I think that's so funny that they brought back just this random prop that people became obsessed with and actually gave it like a real meaningful purpose.
Yeah, and one of my favorite parts is that is like so obviously not the most efficient way to carry anything, because it's like you have this much square footage inside to put anything and it's like this high. You can't really fit anything. Just like a duffel bag will do. I don't know, but they really wanted to.
That's an example of fan service done like
that's done
really,
correctly.
really well.
Yeah, they didn't even like draw attention to it.
No.
They're like, what is that thing? No, it's just like, here it is. But that was cool. So I had to make a note of that because it's those like little things peppering in this legacy of movies that you have that makes it extra special.
After Din gets paid, we get to see his full like shiny Beskar armor.
Yes. So we probably should have mentioned in the very beginning of this episode is when Din turns the child into the client and the doctor takes him away and Din's like asking, what are you going to do with it? And they're all like, we don't have to tell you, actually, legally, we don't have to tell you, fuck off. And gets paid. And then he immediately goes and gets his new Beskar armor. I think it's called a cuirass.
Yeah, he got that stimmy armor and got a new set of armor.
Well, his shit got fucked up.
Yeah,
finding that mudhorn. It was all broken.
Yeah.
So when he walked in to the armorer's space, she was like, ew, we need to start over. Again, that scene gives us a little bit more backstory between like how Mandalorians view the Empire specifically, because correct me if I'm wrong, is the Empire the reason why Mandalore isn't a thing anymore?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the whole reason why they have to live in hiding on different planets is because of actions that the Empire took.
Yeah, because they basically, and I'm no professional on the subject. As far as I know from the show, the Empire, they just kind of like to run everything. Mm-hmm. They wanted to like rule over Mandalore. They wanted Mandalore to be like subservient to them. And the Mandalorian were like, no. And they
didn't like that.
They went to war over it.
Okay, so you can imagine how pissed off the rest of the Mandalorians are when they see this Imperial stamped Beskar.
Yeah.
That they're like, this was stolen from us.
Yeah.
And now you're working for these people?
Yeah.
I don't know. That was kind of important for someone like me who doesn't know these things from watching the previous movies. And then, yeah, like you said, we got to see Din in his iconic, beautiful, shiny armor.
But he doesn't get his insignet, however you say it.
Yeah, signet. Not yet, because he was like, I
haven't earned it because I didn't kill that thing. But
I didn't kill that thing, and the thing that killed that thing, I just turned in for money. So
yeah, so like I might got to do something about that. But he did get his whistling birds.
His whistling birds, which show up again in season 2. Whistling birds are fucking cool.
Yeah, he was on some old Tony Stark shit.
Oh my god.
What?
You sounded like DJ Pauly D. When you said that.
I've been watching a lot of Jersey Shore Family Vacation on Hulu. It's not a sponsor. Although, Pauly D, if you do want to sponsor us.
Yeah, only you, Pauly. I wouldn't take a sponsorship from anybody else. We get the whistling birds, which are cool as hell, as Din is leaving for his next job, because that's all he wanted from Cargo was his next job.
Yeah.
He looks at his little thing that the baby took, and he's like, fuck, and he gets out.
Yeah.
And then we have this awesome heist sequence.
So yeah, he is going back to get the child. And part of that is because we learn in these first 3 episodes, and I think this leading back into the finale eventually, Din mentions how he was a foundling, and we find out, the Mandalorian saved him. I think he kind of sees the child that way. I don't think he feels necessarily good about working for the Empire in this moment, or at least with them. And I think, being with this little thing for as long as he was, I don't think he felt necessarily good about handing it over.
Right. And also you have to remember that this little thing just saved his life.
Yeah.
So it's not only that he's cute, because he is. It's not only that he's like Din's foundling. It's also that he feels indebted to him because he saved his life. So it's like almost paying off that debt. Because again, Din doesn't know. All he knows is that this baby is now in Imperial custody, which cannot be good, right? Like, you don't know if it's bad, but it can't be good. Din specifically, and all of these Mandalorians around him, they're very much sticklers of codes. Like, you don't see their faces because it's their code to not show you their faces. If the bounty hunter's code says you don't ask questions, you don't ask questions. The one time he's willing to break his rules, his codes that he follows so strictly, is for Baby Yoda. So like, for him to even be asking about it in the first place is like, that shows he cares.
We had this awesome heist scene. Mando is rescuing the child. We get to see him like kind of sneak around and like do his real warrior thing, and it was cool. I loved, more than anything, seeing the whistling birds in action.
Yeah. And I mean, he's stealthy sometimes. I don't know, you don't expect someone covered in metallic, like, heavy armor to be so stealthy, but he is. I feel like that's very classic Star Wars, seeing stormtroopers get fucked up.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we got a little bit of that in this episode.
And then that's followed by an equally as impressive set piece as the entire guild essentially hunting Mando as he's trying to rescue the child, as he's trying to leave the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of weird to see, like all of them just kind of turning on him.
Yeah.
Because I
think it was just bizarre to see how many bounty hunters are in Navarro.
Paid. And then as Din is getting kind of pinned down, we see all the other Mandalorian come out, helping my boy Din out.
They say, this is the way.
This is the way.
I'm surprised we haven't said that once so far.
But those are the first 3 episodes, and that kind of really sets off like his journey of just like his new journey is to protect this child, which leads us into chapter 4, Sanctuary. So as he's running away from the bounty hunters and the Empire, they just try and find a spot to kick it, if you will.
A spot to kick it. Yeah, they try to find a planet that has like a low population. People wouldn't go there looking for them. I think Din calls it a backwater scug hole, which seems rude.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's fucked up. But yeah, so
you were living in a sewer, Mando. Shut up.
You were underground. Have you seen your ship? Disgusting. But yeah, so they're basically looking for a place to lie low. So they go to, do you remember the name?
I can't remember the name.
If I think hard enough, I'll remember it, but you can keep going.
Don't do that too much. But this episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. It was her directorial debut.
I remember the name.
Go ahead.
Sorgan.
It's directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. It's her directorial debut, and she's a bit of a Star Wars legacy director.
Yeah.
Because her father, Ron Howard, actually directed. He took over directorial duties for Solo, a Star Wars story.
That's
cool coincidence there. Written by Jon Favreau. In this episode, we get this really, really kind of a one-of-a-kind storyline for the series so far, where he's like kind of helping out just this like village of people.
Yeah.
We also are introduced to Cara Dune, played by Gina Carano. She's a former Rebel shock trooper. Watching the series, like the first season again, I get a little annoyed. I get a lot of annoyed because Gina Carano is so very good in this show.
Gina Carano was perfectly cast as Cara Dune. Cara Cynthia Dune, which I love that name, by the way.
Yeah.
And so it's really upsetting to know that we won't, after season 2, we won't be getting any more of Cara Dune. Well, we won't be getting any more of Gina Carano.
I think they're done with the character.
I think it would be really weird if they recasted her.
And it's not because we're like...
We're not...
I'm not like
Gina
sad.
Carano stands.
No.
It's just frustrating to see someone perfectly cast for something and then they ruin it for themselves and for us.
Because, I mean, it's if you follow this page on any sort of social media, you will know that that is not the political leaning that I that either of us lean toward.
No.
Especially, you know, when you say reprehensible things, comparing the plight of a few to, you know, genocide.
Yeah. The imagined plight of a few.
Yeah. So, needless to say.
But one thing that we can agree on is that Gina Carano was perfectly cast.
She was perfectly cast, and this is some of the best acting I've seen her do.
Yeah.
Is in this show, both seasons.
And I think she mentioned in the behind the scenes part that, like, she felt so much like this character that it felt natural. She didn't feel like she had to act as much.
Yeah. We see it in a different episode, but we see a little bit here too. Like, she gets to showcase, not only does she get to act, but she gets to, like, showcase her, you know, MMA background. Mm-hmm. And she gets to do a lot of hand-to-hand combat. She really does a lot more of it in, I think it was episode 7 or chapter 7 of this, where she's doing that bar fight.
Yeah.
And she's pulling out all of her old moves. It's awesome. But yeah, we get to meet her in this, and they rescue this town. They live there for a while, it seems.
Yeah, because they say at the end, Din says something like, "We raised hell a few weeks back."
Yeah.
So one of those very few moments in which we actually get
get a little clarification. Cara Dune decides to stay, and Din wants to leave the kid there. Mm-hmm. But then we find out, oh shit, there are bounty hunters here too. They're looking for the kid. Yeah. Because as we learned in episode 3, every bounty hunter had a fob on that kid.
Yeah.
Din just kind of has to keep on the move.
I think there was a moment where Din even considered maybe there's a possibility that he wouldn't have to be this bounty hunting warrior for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Like a split second when he was with that lady from Twilight, and he was like, damn, this would be really nice if I could just live here as a dude and not a Mandalorian. In the end, he was like, no, I don't belong here, but this kid loves it here.
Yeah, he goes, he shouldn't live with me. Yeah. I'm no good for...
And then they hear a shot in the forest, and it's Cara Dune taking out a bounty hunter. I don't know, it's interesting to see that there was even, like, a little hesitation, and that he was willing to, like, die for this kid yesterday. Now he's like, maybe I'll just leave him here. It's better if I leave him here. It really shows that he has his only priority, which is something he actually says in the second season, is what would be best for the kid. So I think that's what that moment kind of shows us. And then in the end, when it's obvious what's best for him is to stay by Din, who can protect him, that's what he ends up doing instead. Yeah.
So yeah, we see them ultimately leave because it's not safe on this backwater skug hole. So we go into chapter 5, the gunslinger. Mm-hmm. This one was written and directed by Dave Filoni. So this episode is interesting now that we have season 2, because this episode was considered by many when it first came out arguably the worst episode. Which I don't think there's a bad episode of this series, really.
Maybe not the worst, but maybe the most boring.
Yeah, people definitely considered it filler.
Yeah. Actually, we didn't write down how it starts, which I think is pretty cool. Do you remember how episode 5 started?
No, go ahead.
So, the beginning, we are put into episode 5, and the first thing that we're seeing is the Razor Crest is in a shootout, basically, with some other fuck who says Din's iconic, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold, before he gets shot up. So that kind of establishes why we're on Tatooine. Mm-hmm. Din's ship is all fucked, which becomes quite the trend, quite the pattern. Once he lands on Tatooine, he's introduced to Amy Sedaris, who plays Peli Motto.
Yeah. So this episode winds up, in the characters we meet, so Peli Motto as well, wind up becoming more important in season 2. Like, literally everyone we meet, with the exception of that gunslinger, the kid, everyone becomes so much more important, and this is really a story that is expanded in season 2. So I just think it retroactively makes this episode better, knowing what it's actually setting up. Because I remember going into this episode, and we can talk a little bit more about it. I remember leaving this episode, I should say, a little more annoyed because there was a character that I was like, why would y'all waste her? We mentioned Amy Sedaris as Peli Motto. She was fantastic. She's always great in this.
Character. Peli is so weird.
Yeah.
Weird little lady.
I don't think there's anyone else besides Amy Sedaris. Like that, I feel like that is Amy Sedaris.
Yeah.
So talk about perfect casting. She comes off so like grumpy and frumpy and really does not seem to like Mando at first. But
Doesn't
she does
seem to
like
like anybody. Doesn't like the droids around her.
yeah, but she does
But-
like the child.
She likes the child because he's so fucking cute. How
And
could you
also
not?
because she can get more money that way.
Yes, that too. But she kind of becomes one of the many babysitters that the child has
Yeah.
throughout everything. I hope she comes back in season 3. I want to see more of her. She's
I'd
cool.
be shocked if we didn't see her pop up in season 3 or at least in the book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we are introduced to Fennec Shand, played by Ming-Na Wen. This is who I was specifically talking about. I was a little annoyed when we first saw the show how little they actually used Ming-Na Wen. So we love Ming-Na Wen here at Perez Periódico.
Who doesn't?
And like when I heard she was cast, I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna have her do some cool shit. And then this episode, and like she did some cool stuff in here, but
Yeah.
not nearly what I was expecting or hoping for.
Yeah. So in this episode, she's kind of this like elusive target that Din is helping this like new bounty hunter catch. Din just wants money. But this bounty hunter wants to be officially in the Bounty Hunters Guild. This is like his ticket in. So they find Ming-Na Wen. They find Fennec Shand. And Fennec basically tells this new bounty hunter like, oh, listen, there's a price on that one's head. Like, Din is worth a lot of money. She doesn't say Din because no one knows his name.
Yeah.
She's like, that Mandalorian's worth a lot of money. You should bring him in instead of me. And he's like, oh, cool. And he kills her.
Yeah.
So we're introduced. We get like a little bit of a gunfight with Ming-Na Wen. And then seemingly she is killed.
Yeah, I was a bit annoyed by that. We do see her body at the end of the episode, and
Yeah.
we see this, person dressed. We see their feet.
Long robes and
Yeah.
boots on come and like stand next to her body.
And that's just kind of how it ends. Now, if you're familiar with season 2, you
Know
realize
who
we
that
do
is.
see Fennec Shand again, and you see how she is, brought back. And it's brilliant. There's no disappointment from her in season 2, and I think she made such an impression. Ming-Na Wen is going to voice Fennec Shand again in The Bad Batch, so I'm excited about that, to learn more about her character, because I think her character's cool.
Yeah.
Like, why is she
Especially-
so feared?
I know. Like, she must be good. Oh, well, we know she's good. But just to see, like, from season 1 to season 2 and, like, how quickly she became not decent, but likable.
Yeah, and I just thought about it. So we're going to see her in The Bad Batch, and then we're going to see her in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So we're going to get a lot more Fennec Shand in the coming years, folks.
And I hope she pops up more in The Mandalorian. 'Cause I
Yes.
think that'd be cool.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about where we think the series is going at the very, very end of this. So what initially people thought was some people's least favorite episode leads directly into many people's favorite episode, Chapter 6, The Prisoner. So this is another episode directed by Rick Famuyiwa, the same one who directed Chapter 2, which I mentioned was one of my least favorite episodes. It was written by Christopher Yost and Rick Famuyiwa. I love this episode. I love everything about it. The music, the cinematography, just the story, the horror vibes in it. It's like one of their best episodes,
Agreed.
if not their best.
It's episode 6, so we've seen 5 other
Yeah.
episodes. I don't know, each episode has a different vibe. So I think after we watched this one, I was like, this is my favorite. I was like definitive from the very first viewing.
Yeah.
I was like, this one was my favorite. So good, so cool. The way that they approached like stealth action and stuff like
Yeah.
that, perfect. I
Yeah,
love
and Bill Burr making such an impression.
it. Fucking space Massachusetts.
Space Boston.
Bill Burr plays Miggs Mayfeld, sorry. What do we learn about him in season 1? Because I don't want to get it confused, because he does pop up again in season 2.
Well, we do. I didn't realize this. We do learn that he did serve under the Empire.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a stormtrooper. He made that very
He
clear.
made that very clear.
We learn more about that in season 2.
Yeah.
Basically, now he's like a not a mercenary. They're thieves. That's a group of thieves.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole thing is that this group that Mando used to do work with from time to time, used to roll with this crew.
Which is interesting to think that he used to roll with any crew because he
Yeah.
seems very much like a lone
Yeah,
wolf.
he's in desperate need of money. So he's like, hey, I'll help y'all out, but I need to make sure I gets paid.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just have this, basically it's a prison break episode.
Yeah.
And then it turns into, actually, we're going to imprison you. We're going to steal your ship because it's easier for thieving. And yeah, just his whole prison break he does for himself and just
Yeah.
picking off the member of this gang one by one.
For like a general concept of what the whole episode is. So basically, Din reunites with his old group thieves and criminals, and he's told he's there to help get someone out of. He's not told what kind of ship it is, but he just needs to like get someone back. Like a crewmate had been kidnapped or something, he had to bring him back. Turns out that crew member was imprisoned by the New Republic, so they have to steal him off of a prison ship. And the reason they asked Din specifically is because the Razor Crest is pre-Empire. So it's not on any of their registries or the New Republic registries. Basically, it's like invisible.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to abide by the same rules because it's so goddamn old. It doesn't have the technology on board to like be scanned and shit. So that's why they needed him. So he goes with them. They find the child on his ship and he's like, it's a pet. Don't worry about it. And then they go break out this person and then they locked in a cell. He has to make his way out and then he gets his revenge one at a time.
So my favorite out of all those fights he gets into is when, you know, he shuts off the lights. You see the red lights.
Yeah, like red strobe lights.
Ah, so cool.
Yeah, and then you see him like sneaking up behind Maze.
Yeah, and even before that though, we got a really cool
Migs.
sequence. One of the few hand-to-hand sequences in this was him like just tearing up all those droids. Like all the action in this was just so on point, and the suspense they would build when he would like either seemingly kill someone, but then he like really didn't. Like I thought he killed that one chick from Game of Thrones.
Harry Potter, but yeah, sure.
She was in Game of Thrones.
I would say her most notable work was Harry Potter.
I thought he killed her. I thought he stabbed her in the freaking
They
throat.
didn't make it seem like that.
Thankfully, he did not. But
He definitely killed that big guy though, right?
no.
When he shut those doors on him?
No, he didn't. He was laying back there. I mean, maybe he died later, but he wasn't dead at that point. They were all in that cell. But yeah, my favorite was when he captured Mayfeld.
Yeah.
Just
so good.
that whole like
and that
Batman,
wasn't even, that
like
had no action in it. It was just scary.
pure suspense. That's
Yeah.
another moment that the score like really did its job. Ah, so cool.
Yeah.
We also got Richard Iowati as Q90, who gave the child a run for his money.
I love Richard Iowati. He's one of my favorite British comedians, and the fact that he's voicing an android, kind of perfect.
It's funny because he kind of is an android, so
yeah, he popped up again, kind of.
Yeah,
in
a little
season
cameo.
2, which I think was fun.
Get that check, Richard.
Get that check, Rich. I'm so sorry I called you that.
Chapter 6, that episode holds up so
Yeah.
well.
If you want to watch just one episode of The Mandalorian, watch episode 6. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Chapter 7, The Reckoning, also directed by Deborah Chow, written by Jon Favreau. In this, we see Din rounding up the crew. So we get to revisit Cara Dune, we get Queel, and we get Greef Karga, who's, you know, trying to strike a deal with Mando. This had one of the scarier action set pieces with those big flying things. That was a very unexpected moment.
Yeah, and the fact that it was like completely in the dark
Yeah.
when that happened.
They're like around a campfire
Yeah.
and those fucking things just kind of
Scary. We were like jump scares.
yeah. But we learn a little bit more about what the Force can do. I'm mixed on it because I don't know if it was just like a weird marketing ploy. Like the effect is cool. So what I'm talking about is the healing abilities of the Force. This was around the time that Rise of Skywalker was being released in theaters, and the marketing teams were like, "Oh, be sure to catch this newest episode of The Mandalorian, see how it ties into the new Star Wars movie."
I don't remember that at all.
And because there's a scene in the Rise of Skywalker, spoilers, where Rey heals like a creature with the Force. So that was like the connection between the two, was just that healing ability.
Has that ability been shown before?
Not to my knowledge, not that I've ever seen.
Okay.
I've seen the Force kill plenty of people.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool thing to explore. I like the idea
Yeah.
of exploring new abilities of the Force.
I just feel like it would have come in handy. Like it would have been brought up before.
Yeah.
You know?
And maybe it's just like not all Force wielders can do that sort of thing. But we at least learn that he's able to do that. He heals Greef Karga, who then it feels indebted to
Yeah.
Mando's crew.
Yeah, the child kind of does that a lot, where he's like, "Oh, you're trying to like get me turned in. Let me save your life."
Yeah.
and you'll rethink that decision.
Yeah, it's kind of his thing.
It's kind of his thing.
Except for Cara Dune. He
does
did try to
want-
kill her.
He did try to kill Cara Dune. Ooh, well,
He couldn't, oh, poor little guy. He couldn't tell that the arm wrestling was like
yeah.
something friends can do.
It's like when you're playing with like your friend or something and your dog doesn't know, so they like start barking because they
Yeah.
think you're fighting. It was like that, except for if your dog could like choke people out.
Yeah, which is weird because, you know, the first time the child saw them fight and they were like holding guns to each other's faces.
Yeah, he was sipping on soup
was
like
just
nothing was fucking wrong. He was like, "Oh,
taking
he
a
got
shot.
this. He got this."
Yeah, he was taking a shot of Spotchka, that glowing alcoholic drink.
That was who taught you about Spotchka?
Oh, I'm a very cultured man.
It was me 2 days ago.
So in this episode, perhaps we get introduced to one of my favorite characters by one of my favorite villains in the biz right now, Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon. So I love Giancarlo in basically everything. He came to prominence recently in Breaking Bad.
That's what I know him from.
And he popped up in this, and right after this he popped up in The Boys.
Was he a villain in The Boys?
Spoilers for The Boys, minor spoilers, I won't give any story details. he is at the top of like the chain of villains. So he himself is not like a super powered villain that I know of, but he is not a good guy in that show.
I just want him to be like someone's dad, you know?
I
Just
know.
someone's like cool, sweet, kind old dad.
Yeah.
Why has he got to be mean in it? He doesn't have a mean face. I don't understand it.
Well, that's what makes him so much more menacing,
you got
though.
that, you got that.
Is that he looks like a regular ass
Yeah.
dude, and
he
then
looks
you're like,
nice, and then he's like, actually.
and then you hear him speak, and it's
Yeah.
like, my dude, Jesus Christ. He shows how ruthless he is in this.
Yeah.
He kills everyone in that building.
Yeah. To get to the child.
Yeah, he kills the
basically.
client. He kills the squad in there.
Yeah, these people that are all working for him that weren't doing anything wrong. Like, it wasn't like they were about to turn on him or anything.
No.
They just killed him.
He's just like, y'all fucked up, so y'all are gonna die, and I don't care.
Bizarre. But anyway, yeah, I think that's what that was supposed to mean. It should be like, oh, like, he doesn't give a shit about anybody.
Yeah.
He does not care.
Yeah, he's ruthless. We see him at the very, very tail end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
In this episode, we also see Quill's untimely sacrifice. Not sacrifice, he was murdered.
He was trying to get the kid off the planet.
At this point, IG-11 has been reprogrammed to be a nurse droid, not a bounty hunter droid.
But didn't made him stay on the ship.
Yeah, that leads us directly into Chapter 8,
Yeah,
Redemption.
Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 are kind of like a part 1, part 2.
Yes, and what I really like about those, Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 as a 1-2 combo feel more in line with the storyline of Season 2. Like, those are kind of like the prologue of Season 2,
Yeah.
if you will. At the top of the season finale, Chapter 8, is when we get that Jason Sudeikis cameo, where he is one of those, the troopers, and Bastard punches the child several times. This episode was directed by Taika Waititi and written by Jon Favreau. Taika Waititi, you guys know we are Taika stans. He directed Thor Ragnarok. He directed What We Do in the Shadows, Jojo Rabbit, and he is one of the creators of the What We Do in the Shadows TV show. Directed a couple of those.
We love that show, by the way.
Before we get into story details, right off the bat, this episode is one of my favorites of the series. This episode has a ton of humor in it, which is, that's kind of Taika Waititi's thing. And it's not even necessarily just like he likes to throw joke after joke after joke at you. It's just
Right.
like finding the humor in the moments,
Yeah.
which I think is a very big difference than, just kind of being a goofball, like slapstick comedy or something like that. Because there are some Star Wars properties out there that are a little self-serious. They try to be a little too dramatic, in my opinion. So something like this where we get those moments of levity.
And an otherwise very like bleak and hopeless seeming.
Yeah, circumstance.
Yeah.
This episode has humor, has a lot of heartfelt moments, a lot of, really heavy moments, and plenty of action. And that's why Taika Waititi is getting his own Star Wars feature film. Like, there are no details behind what that is.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see if it's anything like what he had to do with this episode. I'm excited for whatever he does.
Yeah, if it's anything like anything he's ever done ever,
Yeah.
it's going to be fantastic and we're going to love it. So.
Yeah, so sign me up. But yeah, this episode, we hear Din's actual name. We hear Din Djarin, and we finally finished learning about his foundling past. His parents were killed, and he himself was saved by a group of Mandalorians who accepted him. When he came of age, he swore himself to the creed and all that jazz. There's a lot of action in this episode. The first being when IG-11, after Moff Gideon gives them like till nightfall to make up their damn mind what they want to do. And they're like, we could try to go through the sewer. Meanwhile, IG-11's coming through, just blazing through all these stormtroopers.
I love the way that his like physicality is. He only turns like one way and then he has to turn completely around.
Yeah.
But he can like turn around and shit. It's so cool. It makes it so badass.
Or like he can like compartmentalize, so like just his like torso can turn around.
Yeah.
Because at one point he did that to protect the child.
Yeah.
So like his arms were still going straight, and
it's really, really cool how they did
really,
his,
really neat.
which makes it
development.
like, it looks like you're watching just like a bunch of like seared together pipes just go walking around. But it looks so cool. I don't know. It's some of the best gun fighting action.
And what was cool at the beginning of the episode, it's not even just like he was shooting. He's more than just like a shoot 'em up kind of guy, because he was like piecing up those stormtroopers who were punching little baby Yoda. And he was like throwing them combos. So we have that awesome shootout once IG gets to our group and they decide, oh, this is our time to attack.
This is like a last grand stand.
Yeah, this was definitely something you would expect from a finale, and I think it delivered.
Yeah.
So we get that awesome shootout scene in which Moff Gideon comes out. Even when he's fighting, he's like super cool about it.
Oh yeah, like he doesn't want to expend a lot of energy.
2 shots, that's all he did. And he nearly killed Din.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I know, poor bastard. We get the armorer scene, which is one of my favorite scenes of the series. If y'all remember, the armorer in the finale has this really fantastic fight scene she has with a bunch of stormtroopers.
Yeah, she basically has just like a wrench
and a hammer.
And it's just like, okay, I'm gonna have to kill you all with this, and then she does.
I think something you know a little bit more about than I do is a lot of the extras in this, the stormtroopers in this.
Right. In this last episode, there has to be these scenes in which there are a ton of stormtroopers. And I think the studio was having difficulty with that, or it was too expensive to try to like hire a bunch of actors and also make suits for all of them and all that stuff. So they called in, I can't remember what they're called, but it's a group of Star Wars fans from across, like, not even the country, the world. But basically, it's a group of fans who all have their own custom stormtrooper armor, and there are different like regional groups. So they called the groups that were close to where they were filming and were like, hey, would you be available to like come be in a Star Wars project? So basically a lot of those stormtroopers that you're seeing in the background of those big like wide shots are Star Wars fans who are a part of this group who all have their own stormtrooper armor. So it's not just like extras. They were basically just like, come if you can, because we need bodies and suits, basically.
Oh, also we get the sky battle between Moff Gideon and Mando.
Mm-hmm. We see Din using the, I think it's called the Phoenix?
The Rising Phoenix.
Yeah.
Man, that's a jetpack.
It's a jetpack.
That's a
It's
jetpack.
just a glorified jetpack. But we see him using that for the first time. That was actually something that I think when he got his signet, that's when she was like, you can do it now. Cool.
Yeah.
Which was also in this episode, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's a part where Din gets a big boo-boo on his head. And
the face reveal. We didn't even talk about that.
So basically, to survive, Din has to show his face to IG-11 so he can heal him. It's like kind of the end of this arc that Din had of not liking droids because droids killed his parents, which we also found out, I think, in this episode. IG-11 takes off Din's helmet and we see his face for the first time. And I mean, it's like one of those things where it's like, I know what Pedro Pascal looks like. We all do. You could Google it if you wanted, but still seeing his face like coming off that helmet and his face underneath, you're just like, oh my god, that's what he looks like. Wow. And also he's all fucked up, like he's completely bloodied, which is fine, he's still handsome. And then IG-11 heals him and
he tells him a joke.
What?
He tells him a joke.
He does tell him a joke. He's like, you have damaged your central processing unit.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you mean my brain.
And he was like, that was an attempt at humor. And he was like, okay. Oh, IG-11. So again, IG-11 saved Din's life. And in the end, you see Din trying to like save IG-11.
Yeah, because he does, IG makes
to.
that big sacrifice, which that's a testament to the show. It's the show's writing and the direction that like this character who we really only saw for 3 episodes.
Yeah.
We were like, aw, that was a real heartfelt like goodbye to that character.
Yeah.
And there's a really, really subtle but lovely tribute to him in season 2. Go watch Mando Talk where I pointed out. It's a really powerful moment for Din as a character, but also just in the show and seeing how they approach these characters who we have very limited time with. Then we have this sky battle with Moff Gideon. Compared to all the other action that happened in the episode, it's a little bit of a quicker moment.
Right. It's not really a battle as much as like Din just trying to catch up and place a bomb.
So, I mean, it was cool and all, but it's just like everything else we had gotten just before it. Yeah. It kind of like not cheapened it, but it was very quick.
I don't think it was supposed to be anything big and grand anyway.
But we definitely get more from Moff Gideon in next season. Yeah. But something we do see by the time after Din and the child leave, we see little Jawas picking at Moff Gideon's ship. And then we see this beam of light come through the ship. We see Moff Gideon wielding the dark saber. Mm-hmm. So everyone knows what lightsabers are. Lightsabers are the tool, the weapon of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. Oh, we also heard Jedi for the first time in this episode. Oh. When the armorer is like saying, I know legends of
sorcerers,
Mandalore the Great, who fought sorcerers with these powers.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the Darksaber was wielded by the Mandalorian, who was also a Jedi.
I didn't know there was a Mandalorian who was also a Jedi.
There was just the one.
Wow.
There are many better resources than myself that can give you a brief but thorough Wikipedia. I think I watched the video from Variant Comics on YouTube. They did a really great, I think it was like less than 10 minutes, just going through the history of the Darksaber. It's real concise and it's way more informative than what I'm about to say. Whoever wields the Darksaber rules over Mandalore.
Yeah.
We find out that Moff Gideon, like we knew he was involved with the Purge, where a lot of Mandalorians were killed, but the fact that he has the Darksaber is like, oh, you're like in it deep.
Yeah.
That's why, that comes more into play, but it was a big reveal for this because I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
And I think, people who didn't watch that's them, that's Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau pulling from other sources.
Yeah.
And really bringing it to life. And in this case, for real, because it was from the animated show.
Series. Which makes sense for Dave Filoni to be being like, look at my prior work.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and that's season 1 of The Mandalorian. It was really, really cool revisiting this. When I find something that I really, really enjoy, I tend not to watch it as much because I kind of want to preserve like that feeling of when I watched it for the first time.
Yeah.
And then, you watch, season 2 gives you recaps and they'll show you clips from season 1 and whatnot.
They'll show you what you need to know.
But yeah, so it was cool revisiting it after, really about a year and a half. Everything it sets up really makes season 2 just kind of pop all the more because I love season 2.
Yeah.
Even though even if season 2 in a much better way falls into the Age of Ultron thing, we're setting up a lot of stuff. Like we're setting up Ahsoka Tano's show and all this other junk. I mean, they do it in a much better way. It's more fluid.
Yeah.
And it feels like it actually serves the purpose of this story.
I love The Mandalorian so much.
A couple things we maybe forgot to mention throughout the breakdown of each episode. I love that they added a sign language in this series.
Yeah, so
and starting with this season.
Yeah, so in episode
I believe it was 5. Yeah.
Yeah. We meet Tusken Raiders. Are they something that pop up? I think they pop up in the movies,
right? They popped up in the very first one.
Okay. Yeah. So their language is a form of sign language. And I believe when they were creating the sign language for the show, they actually consulted with someone fluent in ASL, American Sign Language, to create like an offshoot of it that would make sense, but is simplified.
Now, wasn't one of the actors either as one of the Tusken Raiders or it might have been one of the actors in the Mandalorian suit? I believe they might have been hearing impaired, no?
I don't know.
Troy Kotsur. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. Troy Kotsur is a deaf American actor who played a Tusken Raider in the 5th episode of The Mandalorian. And he is also the first deaf actor to appear in a Star Wars production.
It's kind of sad that it took that long, but that's cool. I wonder if that was also the same person who helped develop that language.
Yeah.
I wonder if he was back in season 2, because we do see Tusken Raiders again in season 2.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Another interesting fact, during the filming of Mandalorian season 1, Pedro Pascal was actually in a I think it was a Broadway play. He was in King Lear. So he wasn't on set all the time. He was not the Mandalorian a lot of the time. But in the meantime, there were 2 stunt doubles who were in the suit the whole time. So how they filmed it was the stunt double would be in the suit delivering lines, doing gestures. And after the fact, Pedro Pascal would dub in his lines, basically. So they kind of had to work together. It was interesting watching the behind the scenes thing. Pedro Pascal mentioned having to work with the stunt doubles who were actually the body of the Mandalorian and try to work with them to create one cohesive character.
That's so interesting because it's kind of like the reverse of what Misty Rosas did.
Yeah.
Who had to work off of voice recordings that Nick Nolte did.
Yeah.
He had to work with film performances from these physical actors.
And so I can't even imagine what that must have been like to try to make one cohesive character when 3 people are playing him essentially. So I want to give a shout out to those 2 stunt performers. Brendan Wayne, and I guess he did a lot of this gun stuff. And then Lateef Crowder would do more of the hand-to-hand stuff. And Lateef Crowder is actually black. So at some points, we got a black Mandalorian in there. Well, season 2, we had the black Mandalorian. But so that's pretty cool.
So, yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this month's deep dive.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We're going to call it a night, and we will see y'all next time. Stay tuned for the next deep dive announcement. Peace.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And also, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch. All right, see you next time.